We all know the story. Two con men pretending to be clothes makers turn up at the palace and tell the emperor that they can create for him the most magnificent outfit. When they set up their looms and start weaving, the emperor and his officials notice that the looms appear to be empty. But the emperor doesn't want to complain in case he looks like a fool. Eventually the outfit is finished and the two con men mime dressing the emperor, and everyone tells him how wonderful the garment is. Buoyed by this praise, he sets off on a procession through the city before his subjects. Everyone's a bit confused that the emperor is walking naked through the streets, but no one dares say anything. Why would they? Why would you speak out when everyone else is silent? Maybe the emperor isn't naked at all, and it's all in your head. Maybe, if you say something, you'll get punished. In the end, it takes a child to point and laugh and expose the fraud. The Emperor's New Clothes by Hans Christian Andersen was originally published in 1837, but it feels more relevant than ever. Just look at this.
Great. Good for her.
Excited?
Really yeah.
Leah's competing in the finals. Who do you think's going to win?
I have literally no idea.
I don't know anything about
I don't know anything about swimming.
NCAA swimming.
Yeah. I'm just here supporting.
Did you guys watch Leah Thomas swim?
Yes.
What did you think?
Great swimmer.
Beautiful swimmer.
Beautiful swimmer.
They're talking about the swimmer Leah Thomas, who has smashed a number of records and on Thursday won the 500-yard freestyle in Atlanta. But what is it they are conspicuously not saying? Well, Leah Thomas is a transgender athlete, a biological male, and therefore has obvious physical advantages over others in the race. And reactions to this seem to be split between those who just talk as though Leah Thomas is no different from the other competitors, and those who, like the child in the story, point out the obvious truth. Earlier this week, Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne spoke in the House of Lords about a woman who had allegedly been raped on a hospital ward. And when police contacted the hospital, they were told that there were no men on the single-sex ward and therefore the rape could not have happened. But one of the patients on the ward was transgender. There was CCTV footage of the assault, and it's taken over a year for the hospital to admit this. One wonders how many other cases like this there have been. Now, the NHS Constitution guarantees single-sex accommodation. But Baroness Nicholson has alerted the public to a policy known as Annex B, which means that if any female patient complains, they are to be told that it's not true. There are no men there. Don't trust the evidence of your eyes. If we tell you that the emperor is wearing clothes, then he's wearing clothes. And if you think differently, you better shut your mouth. How did we get to this point? Well, in 2010, Health Secretary Andrew Lansley announced that NHS wards must be segregated by sex. But I've seen a document from the same year from the NHS Information Standards Board entitled Mixed Sex Accommodation Specification, which makes clear that the segregation was by gender, not sex, and that the public ought to be told different in order to prevent confusion. So here's what it says. The policy commitment relates to gender, not sex, but to ensure a better public understanding, it is referred to as mixed sex accommodation. So there it is in black and white, the NHS admitting that it will be misleading the public. Now, I put in a Freedom of Information request to NHS England and asked the following question. Please, can you clarify who made the decision to misinform the public on how the policy was implemented? And when was this decision made? Is it still official NHS policy to speak of sex to the public when gender is what is actually meant? In their reply, they said that NHS England does not hold recorded information in relation to this request. However, they did say that the current guidance on delivering same-sex accommodation recommends that trans people be accommodated according to their presentation. This guidance is currently under review with a focus on ensuring privacy, dignity and safety for all patients. We aim to publish the reviewed guidance by April 2022. So at least we have clarification there from the NHS that they accommodate people on the basis of gender identity rather than biological sex, even though Andrew Lansley had specifically pledged in 2010 that biological sex would be the determining factor. Murky stuff. And now, with the revelation of this Annex B policy, where staff will tell patients that they are simply imagining that men are present on female wards, we have reached a point whereby the NHS is openly gaslighting its patients. Now, the term gaslighting means to deny observable reality in order to make someone else doubt their own senses. The word comes from the 1940 movie Gaslight, in which a husband convinces his wife that she's going insane by, among other things, dimming the lights and then denying that the house is getting darker when she points it out. But there have been so many examples of gaslighting. Remember when CNN claimed that protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin were mostly peaceful, in spite of the clearly visible backdrop of burning cars and buildings? Or when the BBC reported on what they called largely peaceful protests, even though in the same headline it notes that 27 police officers were injured. And how about this one? This is also from the BBC earlier this week. So it tells the story of an 83-year-old woman who has been arrested for killing and dismembering another old woman she met online. The elderly killer had been in prison for over 50 years, having murdered 2 female friends. Now, it might be my prejudice, but this doesn't sound like the behaviour of an elderly 83-year-old woman. There are very few female serial killers, even fewer who target other women. And it's only towards the end of this BBC article that we get a reference to the fact that the killer had, quote, recently identified as a woman. So it's literally inserted into the text as an aside, as though this is some inconsequential aspect of the case. So the BBC were misrepresenting the case. This is a man who has killed women, but we're expected to pretend otherwise. Now, I've always been of the view that if someone feels that they are in the wrong body and transitions in order that they can live a happy life, I will call them by the name they want to be called, and I will happily use the pronouns of the opposite sex out of courtesy. But I don't think that courtesy ought to extend to men who choose to murder women. If murderers get upset about being misgendered, my sympathy is limited. People often say that the culture war is a right-wing myth, or that it's just a few students getting overexcited about a cause, or that it's all just noise on the internet. But let's take a step back and see what is actually happening here. So we've got biological males competing in women's sports and telling us that it's fair. NHS hospitals are telling women they couldn't possibly have been raped because there were no men on that ward. The BBC is reporting on male serial killers but using female pronouns. We have reached a point where major institutions, mainstream media outlets, even our hospitals, are lying to us and telling us that if we don't go along with the lie, we're bigots. That unless we deny the truth of what we can so plainly see, we're reactionary and hateful and ought to be ashamed of ourselves. You remember that line from George Orwell's 1984? The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. This is what tyranny looks like, when those in power create a pseudo-reality and the rest of us have to read along from the approved script. Now, I've always taken the liberal view when it comes to trans rights. As far as I'm concerned, anyone has the right to call themselves whatever they like, to dress however they like, to undertake surgery if that's what they need to do. I've spoken to enough trans people to know how difficult it is to go through that process and to live with that continual feeling that you're not in the right body. And trans people deserve protection from those who would see their basic human rights denied. But in a liberal system, no one has the right to demand that other people use language that they don't want to use, or to demand that people pretend to believe something they don't believe, or to demand that people deny reality. Because that means you're taking away the rights of others. So my feeling is this: we need to stop going along with the lie. We need to be braver. We need to take our cue from the child in Hans Christian Andersen's story, pointing out the obvious when most people are too afraid to do so. And when you do this, and you will inevitably be smeared as hateful and transphobic, remember that that is simply an extension of the coercive strategy. It is perfectly possible to oppose anti-trans hatred and prejudice, and to simultaneously understand the importance of speaking truth and not surrendering to a world of fiction.